The evening sky was painted with shades of gray, and the heavy clouds looked ready to burst at any moment. Ayan walked along the narrow path that cut through fields of tall grass, his small backpack slung across his shoulders. He had been traveling for several days, moving from town to town, curious about the hidden corners of the country. He was not a wealthy man, but his heart was rich with a desire for adventure and stories. Wherever he went, he listened to people's tales, old legends and family histories, carrying them like treasures in his memory. That day, he had heard about a village not far from where he was walking. The people he met on the road had spoken, in hushed voices, telling him about a woman who lived apart from everyone else. They called her the Queen. It was not clear if she was truly a queen or if the title had been given to her by the villagers. But one thing was certain: her life was wrapped in mystery. Some said she was cursed, others said she had been betrayed by her family, and a few believed she was protecting something precious. Ayan had smiled politely when he heard these tales, but his heart had been filled with curiosity. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Ayan quickened his steps. The road grew slippery, and soon the drizzle turned into a heavy downpour. He pulled his thin scarf tighter around his shoulders, but it did little to keep him dry. His shoes were soaked, and the mud clung to his feet, slowing him down. The village was still a distance away, and he needed shelter. He looked around desperately, searching for any sign of a house or a shed. That was when he saw it. At the end of a broken path stood a large structure, its walls old but proud, its tall gates slightly open as if inviting him inside. The building looked like a forgotten palace, half hidden by creeping vines and wild plants. It had once been grand, but now it carried the quiet sadness of years gone by. Something about it made Ayan hesitate. The villagers' words came rushing back to him: the queen, her baby, the mystery. Could this be her home? The rain grew heavier, and a loud clap of thunder shook the air. With no other choice, Ayan ran toward the gates. He pushed them open and stepped inside. The courtyard was silent except for the pounding rain. He hurried across and found a large wooden door. When he knocked, the sound echoed through the empty halls inside. For a moment, no one answered. He thought of leaving, but the rain made it impossible. He tried again, knocking louder this time. The door creaked open slowly, and there she stood. A woman dressed in a simple but elegant robe, her hair tied back loosely, her eyes sharp yet weary. She looked younger than Ayan had expected, perhaps, only a few years older than him, but there was a regal presence about her. She was beautiful in a way that carried both strength and sadness. In her arms, she held a small baby who was crying restlessly. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The woman studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether he was a stranger or a messenger sent by fate. Ayan quickly lowered his head and said softly, "Forgive me for disturbing you. I was caught in the rain and had nowhere else to go. May I stay here until the storm passes?" The woman did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at her baby, who was still crying in her arms. She rocked the child gently but with little success. Finally, she stepped aside, allowing Ayan to enter. He walked in cautiously, his wet shoes leaving marks on the cold stone floor. The air inside was cool and carried the faint smell of old wood and herbs. The room was dimly lit by a single lantern, and the sound of the rain against the roof filled the silence between them. Ayan glanced around and saw signs of a life lived quietly. Shelves with jars, a small bed in the corner, folded blankets, and a chair near the window. It was not a palace of gold and jewels, but it carried dignity in its simplicity. The woman closed the door behind him, then turned her attention back to her child. The baby's cries grew louder, echoing against the walls. Ayan stood awkwardly, unsure of what to do. He wanted to thank her for the shelter, but the words stuck in his throat as he watched her struggle. She held the child close, whispering something softly, yet the cries did not stop. At last she looked at Ayan. Her eyes, dark and deep, carried both exhaustion and authority. In a voice that was steady but tired, she said something that took him completely by surprise. "Calm my baby and I'll be yours." Ayan froze, the words hanging in the air like a secret revealed too soon. He blinked, wondering if he had heard correctly. He had expected her to ask him to leave, or perhaps to fetch something, but instead she had spoken words that were impossible to understand in that moment. What did she mean by, "I'll be yours"? Was it a promise? A test? Or something else entirely? He looked at her again, at the lines of fatigue on her face, at the way her arms trembled from holding the baby too long. She did not look like someone giving away her heart lightly. She looked like a mother who had reached the end of her strength. The request was not about love or possession. It was about trust. She was asking him, a stranger, to do something she could not manage at that moment. Ayan's hands felt cold and his chest tightened with nervousness. He had never held a baby before. What if he did something wrong? What if the child cried louder in his arms? Yet something in her gaze told him that he could not refuse. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he stepped closer. She placed the baby gently in his arms, and for the first time in his life, Ayan felt the weight of a tiny life resting against his chest. The baby squirmed and cried louder at first, as if protesting the change. Ayan's heart raced. He held the child clumsily, unsure of how to support the head, how to soothe the small body. Then, without thinking, he began to hum a tune he remembered from his own childhood, a song his mother used to sing when he was afraid of storms. His voice was soft and unsteady, but the melody carried warmth. To his amazement, the baby's cries began to soften. The little eyes blinked up at him and the fists unclenched slightly. The storm still raged outside, but within that room, new calm settled slowly. The queen, if that was what she truly was, watched in silence, her expression unreadable. Ayan felt his breath slow and a strange warmth filled his chest. He had expected this night to be just another stop on his journey, but already he sensed that something far greater had begun. He did not know what it meant yet, but he knew one thing for certain. The woman's words and the child's calmness would remain with him forever. Ayan stood frozen, holding the baby in his arms. The woman's words echoed in his ears. "Calm, my baby, and I'll be yours." He didn't know what to say, and for a moment, silence filled the room except for the gentle sound of the rain outside and the baby's soft whimpers. The child's tiny fingers curled around the edge of his shirt, and Ayan's heart began to beat faster. He had never been in such a situation before, and he struggled to understand what she truly meant by those words. The woman watched him closely, her eyes sharp yet filled with something softer beneath the surface. She did not move to take the baby back immediately. Instead, she leaned against the wall as if her body was finally getting a moment of rest. Ayan noticed how tired she looked, the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands, and the way her shoulders sagged as though she carried a weight far heavier than anyone could see. The baby shifted in his arms, letting out a few more cries before slowly quieting down. Ayan continued humming the old tune he remembered from his childhood, rocking the baby gently. He was surprised by how natural it began to feel. At first, he had been clumsy and stiff, but as minutes passed, he grew more confident. The baby's eyelids drooped, and soon the small body relaxed against his chest. Ayan glanced at the woman, almost hoping for some sign of approval. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. It wasn't the smile of someone offering affection, but of someone who had not smiled in a long time and had forgotten how it felt. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "You see, it's not impossible. Sometimes all it takes is a calm heart." Ayan wanted to ask her what she meant, but the stillness of the moment kept him quiet. He gently sat down on a wooden chair, still holding the baby. His arms began to ache slightly, but he didn't dare complain. Instead, he looked around the room again, noticing little details he had missed earlier. A set of dried flowers kept in a small vase, a piece of fabric embroidered with delicate patterns, and a book placed on a shelf, its pages worn and yellowed. These were traces of someone who lived here not as a queen in luxury, but as a woman who had tried to create a home. The baby finally fell asleep, breathing softly against Ayan's chest. He looked at the woman again and said quietly, "He is asleep now. You must have been trying for a long time." She nodded slowly, stepping closer, and carefully taking the child back into her arms. She looked at the baby's face for a long time, brushing a strand of hair from the tiny forehead. Then, almost as if remembering Ayan's presence, she lifted her gaze to him and spoke. "You must be wondering why I said those words to you." Her voice was calm, but carried a heaviness that hinted at years of silence being broken. "People call me the queen, but I am no ruler. My kingdom is only this house and this child. What I meant was not what it may have sounded like. I meant that if you can bring peace to my baby, then you already understand something most people cannot. And that makes you someone I can trust, even if only for a moment." Ayan blinked, surprised by the honesty in her tone. He wanted to ask her many questions: why the villagers spoke of her like a legend, why she lived alone, and what her true story was. But he stayed quiet, sensing that she would share only what she wished. She sat down on the edge of the bed, gently placing the baby beside her. For the first time, Ayan noticed how small the room truly was. There was no sign of servants, no decorations of power, no sign of a queen's life. Instead, there was a quiet dignity that came from survival. After a few moments, she spoke again. "My name is not important. The people gave me a title I never asked for. They call me queen because they do not understand my life. It is easier for them to turn it into a story than to face the truth. I have been alone here, raising my child in silence. The nights are long, and the days even longer. There are moments when even my strength falters. Tonight was one of those moments." Her words sank deep into Ayan's heart. He realized that her request earlier had not been about ownership or promises. It had been about a simple, desperate need for help. She had been reaching out in the only way she knew how. The rain outside continued to fall, filling the silence between them. Ayan finally found the courage to speak. "I don't know why fate brought me here tonight, but if you need someone to listen, I am here. If you need someone to help, I can do what I can." The woman studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether his words were sincere. Finally, she gave a small nod. "You are a traveler, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes. The curiosity, the searching. You will not stay here forever. But tonight, perhaps you were meant to step into this house. Perhaps you were meant to see what lies behind the name they gave me." Ayan lowered his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. He thought of his journey, of the many towns and faces he had passed, none of which had left as strong an impression as this strange night. Something about her presence felt different, like a story that was unfolding before him, waiting to be understood. The baby stirred slightly, letting out a soft sigh, but remained asleep. The woman leaned down, adjusting the blanket gently. Then, she whispered, almost as if sharing a secret with the night itself. "He is the reason I live, and yet he is also the reason I fear. The world outside does not forgive easily. That is why I stay hidden. That is why I am called queen, though I am nothing of the sort. To protect him, I must wear this mask." Her confession left Ayan speechless. He wanted to ask what she feared, who she was protecting the baby from, and what she had endured. But he also knew that rushing her would close the door she had just opened. So he stayed silent, offering his presence instead of questions. The storm began to ease, and the sound of raindrops softened against the roof. A cool breeze slipped in through a crack in the window, carrying the smell of wet earth. Ayan sat quietly, feeling that this was not just another night of travel. Something about it was shaping the path of his life. The woman's eyes grew distant as she looked at the sleeping child. "Perhaps tomorrow I will tell you more," she said softly. "But tonight, rest. You have done more than you realize." Ayan nodded, though sleep was far from his mind. As he sat in the dim light of the room, listening to the steady breaths of the baby and the quiet strength in the woman's voice, he knew his journey had taken a turn he had never expected. What had begun as a search for shelter in the rain had led him into the heart of a story deeper than he could yet understand. The night passed slowly, and when Ayan opened his eyes in the morning, the storm had gone. The air smelled fresh, and sunlight slipped through the cracks of the window, painting golden lines across the room. He sat up and noticed the woman was already awake. She was sitting by the baby's side, her hand gently resting on the child's tiny chest, making sure he was still sleeping peacefully. Her face looked calmer in the morning light, but her eyes still carried the weight of unspoken stories. Jan rubbed his eyes and greeted her softly, not wanting to disturb the baby. She looked at him for a moment, then gave a small nod. There was no grand welcome, no long conversation, only silence that spoke louder than words. He felt that she was not used to having someone else in her home, and perhaps she was still deciding whether he was worthy of her trust. He looked around the room again. Now, in the daylight, he could see more clearly. The walls were simple, but there were traces of care in every corner. A handmade rug covered the floor, and the shelves were filled with jars of herbs and old objects. On a table near the window, there was a piece of fabric with delicate embroidery, as if someone had been working on it during quiet hours. Everything seemed ordinary, and yet the air carried an unusual stillness, as if the place was holding secrets, too heavy to share. When the baby woke up, his small cries filled the room again. The woman picked him up gently, swaying him in her arms. She looked tired, but her movements were practiced, full of care. Ayan watched silently, wondering again why she lived here alone. At last he gathered his courage and spoke. "You said yesterday that people call you queen, though you are not. Will you tell me why they say that?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward the chair by the window and sat down, rocking the baby slowly. Her eyes stared outside, where the sunlight touched the wet leaves of the garden. After a long pause, she began to speak, her voice soft but steady. "Once I lived among people who had everything, power, wealth, and pride. My family was respected, and I was expected to follow their path. But life does not always move in the direction others plan for us. I chose differently. I chose love over duty, and for that I lost everything." Her words carried pain but also strength. Ayan listened carefully, not daring to interrupt. She continued, "The man I loved was not from my world. He had no riches, no land, no name that people admired. But he had honesty, kindness, and courage. For me, that was more than enough. Yet for my family, it was an unforgivable mistake. They warned me, they threatened me, but I did not change my heart. And so, I was cast out. I left everything behind and built a life with him. Those were the happiest days of my life." Her eyes grew distant as she spoke, as if she were seeing those memories unfold before her. For a moment, there was even a faint smile on her lips. But soon it faded. Fate is not always kind. He was taken from me too soon, leaving me with this child in my arms. Alone, I returned here, far from the world that had rejected me. The villagers saw me, living in this old house with my child, carrying myself with whatever dignity I could hold on to. They began to whisper. They gave me a title. I never claimed the queen. Perhaps they thought it was respect. Perhaps it was their way of separating me from themselves, turning my pain into a story. And so, I became the queen with a child, a figure of mystery, someone people spoke of but never approached. Ayan felt a heaviness in his chest as he listened. He had heard many stories in his travels, but this one felt different. This was not a legend shaped by time. This was a life shaped by choices, love and loss. He looked at her with quiet respect. "And since then, you have been here, raising him alone." She nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at her child. "Every day is a test. The nights are long and the world outside is harsh. But for him, I must remain strong. He is my kingdom, my only reason to keep going. They call me queen, but my crown is only the weight of responsibility I carry for him." The room grew silent again, filled only by the baby's soft sounds and the whisper of the wind outside. Ayan thought of the villagers who had told him about her, their voices full of mystery and fear. They had spoken of her as if she were not real, as if she were part of a tale. Yet here she was, flesh and blood, carrying more strength than any ruler he had ever heard of. He finally spoke, his voice gentle. Perhaps they call you queen not because of power or wealth, but because you carry yourself with the strength of one. Even without a throne, you hold dignity. Even without guards, you protect what is most precious. Maybe they see in you something greater than they can understand. The woman looked at him with surprise, as if no one had ever said such words to her before. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the child, holding him closer. The day moved slowly. Ayan helped where he could, fetching water from the courtyard, preparing a simple meal, and fixing a window that had been damaged by the storm. Though small, these tasks seemed to bring a little relief to the woman. She didn't thank him with words, but with quiet nods and the faint softening of her expression. In the evening, when the baby finally slept again, she sat across from Ayan at the wooden table. The lantern between them glowed warmly, casting shadows on the walls. For the first time, she looked directly at him without guardedness. "You are different from others," she said softly. "Most people only look at me with curiosity or judgment. But you listen. You see what lies beyond the name they gave me. Why is that?" Ayan thought for a moment, then answered honestly. "Because I know what it feels like to carry stories that others don't understand. I travel not to see places, but to see people, to hear what is hidden. I believe every life is a story worth telling, even if no one else listens." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Ayan saw the queen not as a figure of mystery, but as a woman, tired, strong, and longing to be understood. She leaned back, letting out a quiet sigh. "Perhaps," she whispered, "fate did bring you here, for a reason." Ayan remained silent, but deep inside he felt it too. This was no ordinary meeting. He had walked into the heart of someone's hidden life, and now he was a part of it. Whether he stayed for days or only one night more, he knew he would carry this story forever. The days that followed were unlike anything Ayan had experienced in his travels. He had always thought of himself as a wanderer, someone who moved from place to place, collecting stories and never staying too long. But here, in the quiet home of the woman called Queen, time seemed to slow down. Every day began with the soft cries of the baby, the smell of herbs boiling in a pot, and the sound of silence stretching through the empty halls of the old house. At first, Ayan thought he was only a guest passing through. He told himself he would leave once the weather cleared and his shoes dried. Yet each morning when he thought of leaving, something held him back. Sometimes it was the baby's tiny hand reaching out as if to stop him. Sometimes it was the woman's tired face trying so hard to appear strong while carrying all the weight alone. And sometimes it was simply the quiet bond that was forming between them, wordless but real. He began helping with small tasks, at first shyly, then more confidently. He carried water from the well, chopped wood for the fire, and repaired little things around the house. The queen, as people called her, didn't thank him in grand words, but he noticed how her shoulders relaxed just a little when he helped. She began to trust him not through speeches but through silence, the kind of silence that says, "You may stay." The baby grew fond of Ayan too. Whenever Ayan picked him up, the child would calm more quickly than before. The queen noticed this, and though she never said it directly, her eyes often softened when she saw them together. It was as if the presence of another pair of hands had lifted a burden she had carried too long by herself. But life was not without its shadows. The villagers had begun to whisper. Though they rarely came near the old house, news traveled quickly, in small places. People noticed the young traveler staying there. They asked questions in the marketplace, their voices filled with curiosity, sometimes suspicion. Who is he? Why is he living with her? What does he want? The queen had long been the subject of rumors, and now Ayan's presence added new fuel to the fire. One afternoon, Ayan went to the village to buy some food. He felt the weight of eyes following him. Some greeted him politely, but others looked at him with judgment. A group of older men sat near the tea shop, their voices low but sharp. He is too young to be living in her house. Perhaps he seeks to take advantage of her. Or perhaps he is cursed too, like her. The words stung, but Ayan said nothing. He bought what he needed and returned quickly, yet inside he wondered how much longer he could ignore the stares and whispers. When he returned, the queen noticed his silence. She didn't ask, but Ayan could see in her eyes that she already knew. That evening, after the baby had fallen asleep, she spoke. "The villagers will always talk. They have given me names, stories, and shadows that are not mine. Now with you here, they will create even more. If you wish to leave, I will not stop you." Ayan looked at her, the lantern light flickering across her face. "Do their words trouble you?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Not anymore. I have learned to live beyond their voices, but you are not tied to this place. You should not carry my burdens." Her words were meant as kindness, but to Ayan they felt like a challenge. He thought for a long moment before answering. "Everywhere I go, I hear stories. Some are happy, some are sad, but most fade from memory. This one will not. This is not a burden. It is a choice. If I leave now, I will carry regret. If I stay, I carry meaning." The queen's eyes softened again. Though she quickly looked away, as if afraid to show too much, she whispered, "You are a strange traveler. Perhaps that is why fate sent you here." From that night on, their bond grew stronger. They didn't speak of promises or futures, but each act of kindness built a bridge between them. Ayan learned how to soothe the baby with gentle songs, how to prepare meals with the herbs she gathered, and how to listen to her stories without judgment. In return, she allowed him into the parts of her life no one else had seen. One night, as they sat in the courtyard under the stars, she said quietly, "Do you know why I endure the title of queen? Because even in their whispers there is a strange kind of respect. They think I am distant, unreachable. It protects me from their cruelty. It keeps them away from my child. It is my shield." Ayan nodded slowly, understanding more with each passing day. She was not a queen of riches, but a queen of resilience, of survival, of unshakable dignity. And though the world outside judged her, here in her quiet kingdom of two, she was stronger than any crown could make her. Still, Ayan knew a time would come when he would have to choose. Would he leave and continue his journey as he always had? Or would he stay and become part of this hidden life, with all its struggles and all its beauty? That question lingered in his heart unanswered, as the stars watched silently above. The days turned into weeks, and Ayan's bond with the queen and her child deepened in ways he had not expected. What had started as a night of shelter had become a chapter of belonging. He was no longer just a guest. He was part of their small, fragile world. Yet he knew his path as a traveler meant he could not remain forever. The thought pressed on him, even as he tried to ignore it. One morning, as he packed his small bag to fetch supplies from the village, the queen spoke. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a quiet fear. "One day you will leave, won't you?" The question hung in the air. Ayan hesitated, unsure how to answer. He wanted to say no, to promise he would stay, but promises made in haste often become chains, and he respected her too much to bind himself with empty words. Finally, he said softly, "If I leave, it will not be because I want to. It will be because the road calls me. But even then, I will not truly be gone." She looked at him with searching eyes, then nodded slowly. "I only ask that you do not vanish without goodbye. Too many people have left my life like shadows in the night." Her words struck deep. Ayan promised himself then that he would never hurt her that way. As time passed, the villagers' whispers grew louder, but Ayan stopped caring. He realized that what mattered was not their judgment, but the quiet bond inside the old house. The baby's laughter when Ayan played with him, the faint smile on the queen's lips when she saw them together. These were treasures more valuable than any story he had ever collected. One evening, As the sun set and the sky burned with shades of orange and purple, Ayan sat outside with the queen. The baby was asleep inside, and for once the silence between them felt peaceful rather than heavy. The queen looked at him, her face softer than he had ever seen. "You have done more for me than you realize," she said quietly. "You calmed my baby when I could not. But more than that, you calmed me. For years my heart has been restless, burdened with fear and loneliness. You gave me something I thought I had lost: peace." Ayan was left speechless. He wanted to reply, but no words seemed worthy. He could only look at her, his heart full of emotions he could not name. The next morning, Ayan knew it was time. His feet longed for the road, but his heart longed to stay. He stood at the doorway with his bag, unsure how to say goodbye. The queen held her child in her arms, her expression calm, yet heavy with unspoken feelings. "Will you return?" she asked softly. Ayan's throat tightened. He wanted to promise yes, but life had taught him that certainty was fragile. So he spoke honestly. "I do not know when, but wherever I go, I will carry this place, and both of you, with me. You are no longer just a story I heard. You are part of me." For a moment she said nothing. Then she stepped closer and placed her hand lightly on his arm. Her touch was gentle, filled with gratitude more than anything else. "Go then," she whispered. "But remember, once in this house you were mine, even if only for a short time." Ayan left the old house with heavy steps. The road stretched before him, endless as always. Yet something was different. He was not the same traveler who had entered that gate on a stormy night. He carried with him a bond that needed no titles, no promises, only the truth of connection. As he walked away, he thought of the baby's small fingers holding his shirt, of the queen's eyes when she said those unforgettable words. "You calmed my baby, but more than that, you calmed me." He realized then that love and belonging are not always about possession or permanence. Sometimes they are about the moments that change us forever, even if they last only for a while. And though his feet carried him farther with each step, his heart remained behind, in the quiet home of the queen and her child, where he had found a story worth more than all the others combined.